Okay, so remember that they're changing my voice. These days there's a lot of pesky and weird people trying to crack down on people. So this video is about the fact that there's a sort of multicultural modern day plantation, and it's not just, Democrats, Republicans, it's also white separatists, right? It's the sum total of the planet, especially America. So we see a sort of master mason, master slave, sexual sadism, BDSM bondage kind of state here, right? Dominatrix, right? People who are used to abusing their secretaries and immigrants and any vulnerable people they can find have now expanded into the general population far more than before. Now, maybe this was going on more before than I thought. I don't know. But certainly the signs are more obvious now, and it's clear-cut, and it's very, very sickening. Okay. So when we look at the word slaves, for whatever reason, it rhymes with knaves and to some degree with lays, right? Slaves and lays. In fact, the word L-A-E-S, right, which is similar to L-A-Y-S, is there in the word slaves. And there's interesting wordplay when it comes to slaves, right? Slay and slaves. There's more than one way to commit, a crime against a people, right? There's genocide. There's also patricide. They consider that when they control sexual behavior, okay, and make kind of crypto races, that they're eliminating the heart of the race, which is the male, right? The man was the king. The spear is a phallic symbol. The sword's a phallic symbol. So if you kind of replace their patriarchal lines, you've destroyed that people and made them something else. And if you've done it for the wrong reasons, like we see the racists in the governing class who are basically whites, Jews, and LGBT for the most part, okay, then you've created abominations. And of course, the racists that are doing it can't say that their blood is pure and that the people they're preying on are the only abominations, okay? No offense to anyone. I'm sure we can all agree this is the truth, and this has to be said, especially when you consider all the little children being raped and so on and so forth. Okay. So point number one. They try hard to keep people from organizing their thoughts, right? It's like, to get her, right? Get your thoughts together, right? To get her. Instead, they're stealing the females, right? The word meal is a play on words from melee, food, faux du, grub, right? G-rub, like to rub somebody's butt or what have you. And there's a lot of wordplay like this, right? Pirate, right? Skull and bones, right? Skill and bones, right? A bonesman, right? Boning a woman, right? And so, who has what skills, right? And white people made a system for them, by them, which considers their learning methods. Not all white people learn the same, mind you, but it's aimed at certain specific whites and Jewish and LGBT bloodlines. Okay, think about why there's Greek frats in college and how a lot of nerds are kind of unfocused, like these Greek fraternity people are, and how they, in a racist manner, and maybe there's some truth to it, try to represent Greek people as being, unfocused as well. Okay. Point number two, they limit freedom of speech with excessive censorship and the targeting of individuals. Now remember, slaves were not taken seriously by white society. So when they target people for trying to complain about what they're doing to them and their race and the people at large or whatever, okay, they're trying to make it so that those people are ridiculed, like it said in COINTELPRO, right, where J. Edgar Hoover said he wanted people to discredit, disrupt, and ridicule the Black Panther parties and any other group any other groups that they were targeting. Okay, so again, that's part of the modern day slave thing, right? So all opposition groups with any significant numbers are controlled. Slaves were controlled, and I do believe the Black Panthers were controlled for more than one reason. There were hundreds of Black Panthers that were working for the government, if not thousands, and then some of them were working for social clubs that overlap with the government, like the Freemasons and what have you. They have destroyed freedom of expression for conservatism and the collective. Slaves had their breeding controlled for so-called white, Jewish, and LGBT supremacy. They bred them in a way that was designed to make them more slaves, right? They weren't breeding people to be smarter than they are. They were trying to dumb them down, right? And that continued with the kind of Flint water crisis, Mississippi, Chicago, countless examples of things being put in the environment on purpose that just happened to have the effect of causing generational problems, right? Genetic problems, right? And messing up their, cognition, like they've been doing to me with the fumes and the poisons and what have you. Okay. And of course, they do it to every race, but with an emphasis on black people, and it's a long story why that is. All right, where were we here? Has to do with what the natural martial art order is, and who the pharaoh was in Egypt, and who people naturally are inclined to follow if everything's fair, and so on and so forth. Okay, where are we here? The left is more sabotaged than the right, as they try to make the right seem more manly and appealing, especially in regards to romance. Okay, there's more minorities on the left, right? 6, they threaten people with financial sabotage if they do not listen to mentors. The old crack in the whip routine. In fact, people drive cars, and they're known as whips in the ghetto, right? The O is a reproductive cycle, right? The whips, right? And why? Because when you're a poor black man, you see all these rich people, these rich, attractive females, and their nice cars, their SUVs, their compact SUVs, what have you, right? They're luxury cars, and you see these racist, rich conservatives in their $50,000, $60,000 trucks, right, with big wheels or whatever. Okay, it's a form of them, giving you a psychological whooping is the idea, right? And they're waging a kind of mind, body, soul, spirit war. So they consider that part of spiritual war and has physical effects on your body, right? Stress and so on and so forth. And also people wear chains around their necks that they can't afford, and it's a form of being a slave to sin. And slaves had chains and so on and so forth. All right. Point number 7. They want people to date with their scales and to have sex the ways that they think that they should. This often means that they have to change their sexual orientation, are being forced and coerced to change their sexual orientation as well. Slaves were often raped, and they did the practice of buck breaking. I don't think it's a coincidence it's called buck breaking. Again, going back to the money of the root of all evil. The Bible says people who sin are slaves to sin, right? They're slaves to the money, right? The chains around the neck, right? The whips, and how, cars cost money, and expensive cars cost lots of money, and, the exploitation of the labor force, and so on and so forth. Keep in mind, I'm not a communist. These are just the facts here. Okay, so the buck breaking was when homosexuals would rape a slave and so on and so forth, and because they had the money and power, they were able to do it with impunity. Okay, and we see that going on in various forms today. It's a long story why that is. There's the Boy Scouts, the churches, but it's much more than that. It's more than the foster care kids. It's a lot worse than you think it is. Also, 50% of Greeks were slaves, right? The Greek people, right? And 20 to 30% of the Romans, depending on how you define a slave, were slaves as well. Point number 8. And of course, you have these Greek societies in college. You have one of the most powerful social clubs in the world is the Club of Rome, what have you. Point number 8, there is a scientific racist scale at play, especially when it comes to dating. Think Greco-Roman demons, aka their gods, and the European feudal system. So they had statues which represented their states of mind, and they were based on the gene expressions of the governing class. And, what you then see, and this connects to, pederasty and child rape and child abuse, right? Where, statutory rape, for example, and other forms of people molesting children and young teens, which was commonplace in ancient Greece and Rome. Why you often hear the phrase Greco-Roman. Okay, and our system is a neo-Roman system, right? You have the Senate. The Romans had a Senate. Corporations. The word corporation was first found being used in Rome under Justinian, maybe 500 AD or so. I used to, speak on that a bit. Okay, so where were we here? So 9, Greek societies were historically organizations that upheld white supremacy, and they basically still do. So before blacks were allowed into colleges, right, when they're still segregated, they would kind of uphold, make sure the privileged white kids in the school, whites and Jews and LGBT kids, had the upper hand over the other white kids. That's, look it up, you'll see that that's the case here. Point number 10, research Jewish materialism. The words mate and materialism are connected. Oh, and by the way, a lot of these frats, right, they say the Jewish frat, the white frat, they're still kind of racially divided. Every once in a while there's a token minority in a frat here and there, okay, and quite often they're crypto Jews. So keep in mind that, right? Look at the person who they allow in the frat. Ask yourself, how much are they like them, okay? Look at the difference between Adam Sandler and Michael Jordan. If they look like a black Adam Sandler or something, it's probably because they're not from a black patriarchal line. And their parents might be black, but that doesn't mean that their parents or grandparents are from a black patriarchal line. At some point, another race probably was the male in their line, and they made sure that continued. That's part of what they're doing. That's why there's a phallic symbol, an obelisk in D.C. It's a symbol of sexual control and the white patriarchal line. It's white power, right? White pow, ear, okay? And the phallic symbol is the symbol of the white sword of the white king. And it's a long story why that that is. I'm sure you all believe me because it's retarded not to know that I'm right about this. Okay. Point number 11. Rich people from old money European lines are feigning supremacy after generations of sabotaging other patriarchal lines. Point number 12. There are LGBT sex cult activities everywhere. I'm sure you all know why that is, and I don't want to argue with the LGBT community about whether it's fair or not to say that, but it's safe to say that that's what's going on and everyone knows it. Point number 13. Horus versus Set. So true martial brain power, right, from God versus the argument that being a mere talented scientist after the world is sabotaged makes one magically divine. In fact, that's why it's called being a math wizard. And math and science are closely connected, right? Being a math wizard. And Masons talk about sacred math, right? And they do things that are basically, they dress like kind of magic trick, magicians, and they do things that are very much magic trick-like, right? Optical illusions, right? The checkered floor, manipulating, parts of the brain and so on and so forth. It's a long story why that is.